Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby.
Hello, and welcome to Movies vs. Capitalism, an anti-capitalist movie podcast. I'm Rivka.
And I'm Frank. And we're recording this on Monday, June 17th, the day after the Tony Awards. I don't think we've spoken about the Tony Awards on this podcast yet. I know it's technically not movies, it's theater, but it's within the purview of what we like to talk about.
Yeah, and as theater makers, we like the Tonys.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it was a special year for us because we had a lot of friends who had their work nominated or recognized in different capacities, which was, I don't know, lots of contradictions being what, any kind of award ceremony during what's happening in a global context, but also very exciting and beautiful to see that work recognized and celebrated in artists that we know and know their talent and how wonderful they are.
Yes, we've talked at length on this show about, our general feelings about arts award shows and, like you're saying, the contradiction inherent into being like, who did the best art this year? But it's wild. It was wild to watch and be like, damn, I was in a play with that guy. I got drunk with that guy, and now they're Tony nominees. How cool. But there were a couple of specific things with the broadcast that we wanted to touch on. First, there were a number of attendees in the audience, both actors and also theater creators, technical folks who were wearing Artists for Ceasefire and Theater Workers for Ceasefire pins on the red carpet and then throughout the ceremony. I felt like, and I mean, I can't quantify this, but it felt like there was more, I felt like we were seeing more solidarity with Gaza at this ceremony than we have at any of the past, elite arts ceremonies that we've seen, like the fucking Met Gala or the Oscars.
Mm-hmm.
I'm guessing that's just maybe the fact that we're 8 months into this conflict and conditions on the ground have gotten so horrific that people are finally coming around to at the very least wearing a fucking pin on the red carpet.
Well, and it's not an accident. It was an organized movement. So the organization Theater Workers for a Ceasefire is an organizing movement, group of people, and that was one of their initiatives. So that was intentional. And I think it's important to point out when those things occur because things don't just happen. And it's not just individuals might feel a certain way, but for it to have an impact like that, it's organized. And so I know some of those organizers, and they also organized what they were calling the People's Red Line for the Tony Awards. I think they ended up, it was not massive, but it was a good turnout of folks who were protesting. Yeah, they ended up out at Columbus Circle because I think they got moved from their original place by police, but they were holding signs that said, theater workers stand with Palestine, theater workers draw the line, stand up for Palestine now. They were handing out informative pamphlets. What they were stating was, we stand in firm unity to demand an immediate, permanent, unconditional ceasefire and other things. Yeah, I guess the point is just there was an organizing force, and it's really cool to see how that kind of stuff gets done because we've talked in a lot of the films that we've covered about like when we've recognized moments of organization and strategy and practice, and when there's stories that kind of make it appear as if this stuff happens out of thin air. And I think there's a danger in thinking that.
Oh, yeah. No, I completely agree. And not only that, it's important to acknowledge simply the work that has gone in up until this point from these organizers, which I'm sure has been going on for months and months. Something that was not really great to see that I wanted to touch on was Hillary Clinton fucking showed up once again. Yeah, so Hillary showed up to, I believe she's one of the producers on the musical Suffs, which is about the suffragist movement. Have you seen Suffs?
I haven't seen Suffs. I've heard good mixed thing. I actually haven't heard much about it. I don't know why I'm saying that. Cool. But I like the artists involved, so I assume it's probably pretty good.
Sure. Yeah, a musical about the suffragist movement. Tells the story of Alice Paul and other suffragists during that movement during the Woodrow Wilson presidency, fighting for the right to vote. So like I said, Clinton, one of the producers on the show, so let's trot her out on stage, and she got a big standing ovation from all of the liberals in the crowd. I mean, what she said was pretty innocuous, just saying like, oh, it's so important that we vote this year. More important now than ever, of course. this was a little less offensive than some of her more recent media appearances, like her, showing up on, I don't know, like CNN to say like, well, I've talked to these college students and they don't know anything about history or the Middle East, or, just like any other opportunity she has to come in and just be like, you know what? I think my voters are fucking stupid and useless, and they actually don't know what's good for them. But still, it just really rubs me the wrong way to just see her. I just want her to go away. I just want her to go away forever. Am I being unfair?
No, I think it was not surprising. None of it was surprising. It did take the wind out of my sails. It was like okay, right, here we are. It made sense because her whole glass ceiling and the identity politics of she was supposed to be our first woman president and suffragettes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was just to see everyone giving the standing ovation. I don't even know how many of them believe it. It feels like,
Yeah. I'd be curious.
It just made me kind of sad,
Oh, for sure. Especially within the context of the last 8 months and the genocide in Gaza, and Hillary Clinton being one of the biggest imperialists in the Democratic Party, essentially a war hawk in a lot of ways, and has been cheerleading, the Biden administration and its unequivocal support for Israel over the course of the last 8 months. So I guess to see her again at this time and to see her get that standing ovation was like you said, just felt like such a dissociative disconnect moment for the audience. I'd be curious to like scan through and see if anyone like remained seated during the stand-in of like, were there any people that were like, fuck that, I'm not standing up for this lady?
Yeah, didn't look like it in the videos I saw, but possibly.
So that was on the less great side, but probably the best moment of the night, and this is more of a personal thing for Rivka and I, is that our friend from college, Will Brill, won a Tony Award for her best featured actor in the play Stereophonic. Yeah, we went to college with Will. He's great, and it's seeing him win for this play was
so fun. His face when he won, it was so special.
It was genuine shock. It was genuine surprise.
And I loved his speech. He thanked his therapist, which I thought was wonderful.
He did.
But more to like the point of this podcast, I thought it was beautiful he asked his cast to stand up with him.
Mm-hmm.
And he made a point of sharing like thank you to the creative team for casting what he said was like he's like casting nobodies.
Mm-hmm.
I know all these actors because they're like they've been working theater actors. Like not nobodies, but I think his point was that, and you saw it, like many of the categories and many people who won are also movie stars. Sarah Paulson won, and she's starring in Appropriate. She's fantastic. I don't even know what it means to deserve it, but she's phenomenal in that. Jeremy Strong, Daniel Radcliffe. So it was like, I appreciated him pointing out that like we have seen this trend on Broadway for forever now, but where it's really about how can we sell really fucking pricey tickets? So we're only casting celebrities in these roles. So it is it's an anomaly that he's in Stereophonic that they cast, as he said, nobodies, but like these people that maybe you wouldn't have any idea who they are if you're from the middle of the country coming to get Broadway tickets, right? So I thought that was an important point that he made, and I thought it was a beautiful speech. I thought it was great.
I totally agree. And also should be said that Stereophonic, after the nominations came out, became the most nominated play in Tony history. So,
wow.
Yeah. So, which is, I think, a real testament to the fact that, and we see this in film and television too, that like what people want, what audiences really want are just really good stories told and executed as well as they can be. So, like Will said, like a play with a bunch of nobodies can still become this like sensation. And now, especially after all of these Tonys, the play also won Best Play. Like, I'm sure it'll run for months now, and I'm sure the ticket prices will go up, which is both good and bad. Like we're saying, it's another contradiction. We want original art to be able to succeed in these ecosystems and for people to be able to see them. And it is great that Stereophonic has gotten all these flowers, but now we're faced with the contradiction of like, you just asked me before we recorded, you're like, have you seen it yet? And I was like, no, I haven't. And now the tickets are going to be fucking astronomical. So
I know, I'm lucky I snagged one before they hit the charts.
I should have seen it when it was still off Broadway. All of our friends were like, yo, you gotta see it. And I slept on it, but I'm hopefully going to catch it soon. I saw Enemy of the People, the Jeremy Strong, Michael Imperioli play about a Henrik Ibsen adaptation, I believe, which had very anti-capitalist themes in it. I had not known Enemy of the People, but basically about like Jeremy Strong plays this scientist in this small town, and he discovers like a toxic event at the local baths, which are the biggest economic driver of the town. And he's like, yo, I got to tell people that the baths are like poison. And all of the moneyed interests and political power players of the town descend upon him. They're like, well, maybe you actually shouldn't tell anybody about this. And maybe your data is skewed. And maybe actually you're crazy, because if you do this, you're going to tank our economy and, like the investors, blah, blah, blah. So definitely an interesting story. Although, I mean, I got to see the play for free. Full disclosure, a friend of mine's mom bought tickets. She couldn't go and got to go for free. It was a very good play. I really very much enjoyed it. I think tickets are running anywhere between like $300-$400 to like the thousands because of Jeremy Strong and Michael Imperioli being the leads of it. And I was like, this was great for a free play, but if I had to pay money for this, I would have been like, oh, I got fucking ripped off. Like it didn't change my life, but it just, again, art like this should be accessible to the masses, and especially.
And they do a good job of that in other places. Like I just saw Cabaret, which I can't believe I didn't see when I was in London, because I could have seen it for like, I think it was like $40 and paid a lot more than that.
Mm-hmm.
I would say it was worth it just because I love that musical so much.
Sometimes you want to pay,
Yeah, but it's still like you shouldn't have to pay. Like there are systems where government funds the arts, and so an audience, like an everyday audience, can join, and you don't have to have a lot of money or have to spend a lot of money.
Yeah, and these shows, especially theater like this, they don't get to reach the audiences that they would potentially have the most effect on or be the most affecting towards,
Yeah.
It's if the only people who are seeing your plays are, just like a bunch of rich people, then like, who probably largely agree with the themes of your show or the ideas of your show, then it becomes just like preaching to the choir. And also, just like essentially playing for the royal court and not getting to play for the people, like when Shakespeare was going off at the Globe, those shows were rowdy as hell, because all of like the yeomen and the regular, the small folk could come in and just like see like the first production ever of Romeo and Juliet. And apparently they were like rowdy as hell, and it was like a lot of fun, and it was like this big communal experience. And like that's just so far away from what theater has become, and it's a bummer. Like we used to go see Student Rush. I don't even think they had Student Rush tickets anymore. Like when we were in college, we could see Student Rush for like $20, $30, $40
I think they do. I just think we aged out of that.
Well, I know that we can't get those tickets anymore, but
I mean, I think depending on there's like some things, but the point is like it shouldn't be that like tiny little freaking programs. It should be for everyone.
Yeah, it should be for everyone.
All right. Well, I know we were just going off on our tastes and our high art. However, we're going to transition and talk about the movie Rat Race.
That's right. From high culture to low culture, all in one podcast.
We give it all to you. But before we do, we want to remind our audience that we don't sell ads on this show. We donate our ad space to leftist and progressive organizations. And instead, we rely completely on community support to keep the show going. And you can do that by subscribing to our Patreon.
That's right. For just $5 a month, you get access to our new bonus episodes and our back catalog of bonus episodes. And the link for our Patreon is in the episode description in your podcast player, or you can find it at mvcpod.com. And you know what? While you're there, make sure to rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast on your podcast player so you don't miss new episodes and you help boost our algorithm so that more people can find the show.
We're going to take a break, but we'll be right back with Thalia Sablon and our movie Rat Race.
Hey everyone, we've got an amazing organization we want to tell you about called Anti-Capitalism for Artists.
Anti-Capitalism for Artists is an education-based community dedicated to raising the class consciousness of artists.
Their core offering, the 10-week Intro to Anti-Capitalism course, is designed to be accessible to anyone looking to get familiar with a wide range of anti-capitalist concepts and ideas.
They do this by offering an eclectic array of free virtual and in-person events year-round, geared to meet all manner of knowledge backgrounds. For Frank and I both took the course in different cohorts, and it really was amazing. You get to meet with a group of people who are interested in anti-capitalism, you build solidarity, and it's also a lot of fun.
Yeah, they put together such an amazing, comprehensive reading list from anti-capitalist writers from all different types of tendencies, from Marx to black radicalism to intersectional feminism to queer liberation to modern-day anti-capitalists. So you really get a firm grounding in a diverse and wide array of concepts.
Artists of all kinds, abilities, and professional statuses are welcome to join A4A's community, where they can learn, build community, and co-create their own events and offerings.
You can learn more, reach out, or support their work by donating at anticapitalismforartists.com or find them on Instagram at anticapitalismforartists.
Love you, comrades. Now back to the show. Today on the pod, we are joined by Thalia Sablon. Thalia was born in Haiti, raised in Queens, has her mother's tongue and a New York accent. Thalia earned her MFA in playwriting from Rutgers University. And as an artist, she's focused on creating work that challenges people's capacity for care and understanding. She loves diving into new work and loves a process-based collaboration. When she isn't writing or producing, she's trying hard to not wreak havoc around New York. Thalia, welcome to Movies versus Capitalism.
Hello. Thank you for having me. Hi, y'all.
So happy to have you here. Thalia and I are both in a writers collective together, Conch Shell Writers Collective, which I think I've shared a bit on this pod about before. An amazing group of artists from the Caribbean diaspora. Thalia and I sort of just met because you're new to the cohort, but you brought in some pages from a play that you were working on that I just fell in love with your work, and they had really strong anti-capitalist values. So I immediately was like, hey, will you come on my podcast? And here we are.
Yay. Yeah, I feel like with that play specifically, it's a work in progress, just in the sense that I'm like trying to think. The play is titled How to Steal Time and Other Important Poor People Skills. And I'm just trying to think of like what other like poor people skills have I kind of like collected, being someone who like has to work a lot, has seen my parents work so much. And just, I used to have to do a lot of catering shifts and I hated it so much. Like I used to have like stress dreams leaving these shifts that I was still at the shift, like on the bus, like going home, and I'm like thinking, I have to bring the food to table, whatever that lady asked for wine, or just like people.
The peanut allergy on table 6, I totally forgot about it.
I'm like, I hope she's okay. And then I'm like, she's gonna be fine. She's a millionaire. If anything, she's better off than I am right now on this cramped little like bus going home. And I just like thought that like there are all these like jobs that we do that's in service to people who are just like a lot richer, a lot more privileged in whatever different kind of way. And in some ways, I'm like, I wish that these people had more of an appreciation for the people who are doing this kind of like work, this kind of labor. But in other ways, I'm like, I also wish that richer people were just a little more scared. Like I really really do think that like you should be kind of fearful of this person that you've brought into your home who has access to like everything, from like the things that you love, the things that you hate, from like your medicine, like all of this stuff, and the way that you treat them as if they're beneath you when actually like they're like right here with you. Like they have so much access to you and like all these things, they know the most about you, and to treat them any lesser is like really crazy to me, especially when I feel like we're slowly coming more into a time where people are moving away from like idealizing celebrity, idealizing status, idealizing just having copious amounts of wealth.
Yep.
The people who you consider at the bottom are no longer the bottom. And what does that mean as we're like moving towards these kinds of like moving more towards an ideology and like more towards like, I guess like a social like capacity to just be like, oh, like this is a person in front of me. This isn't a person because of their job or because of like their wealth or because of their status. This is another human being who's trying to relate to me. And like how often like wealth removes that idea that we can relate to each other.
Yeah.
Class consciousness, really.
Yeah, class consciousness. You made so many great points there. What I love is like, as you were talking, I'm like, yeah, it's also theatrical because it comes down to the basic thing of like, when you work these jobs, I never catered, but I did princess parties for people and whatever those jobs were, you are of service in such an intimate way. Like being a food service, it's very intimate and we ignore that. And I think like, I love that you said there's so many ways in which like you should be afraid to like treat someone so fucking horribly who is taking care of your like your intimate basic needs.
Who's bringing you food. Not like, yeah, you should, because of if we can't reach your empathy, then like just be scared. Like because
Because I think about the spaces that I've been in, and you're just like, yeah, while I'm in someone's bedroom, I have access to their most intimate things, but I'm also just not being made eye contact with because the assumption is you need this paycheck so bad that, of course, you are a non-threat.
Yeah, like this idea that you're willing to take anything and everything on how I treat you. No, that's what we perceive the power dynamic to be, and that's what it's been for so long. But like, I think I've started thinking, I'm like, well, what if that was like a little different? Like, what if that shifted just a bit? Because like thinking, especially with people who work as nannies and like babysitters and stuff, there's like this whole thing with a lot of like people who are in like the Upper East and the West Side, where because a lot of their nannies come from like either Caribbean or like African countries, their kids start to develop accents, right? Because these people are with their kids all the time. So there's a lot of like speech pathologists there that like are getting rid of these like small little white children's like Jamaicans accents that they have because they spend so much time with their nannies and stuff. And it's really interesting to me how like oftentimes like these people are treated just kind of like, oh, you're taking my kid, bye, goodbye. But like maybe you should be more involved in that relationship and that thing, because this person has such a big impact on your life that you don't necessarily see, or like you refuse to see, or you're ignoring because of other things that are going on that all stem from you having this like exuberant amount of wealth.
Absolutely. I read a philosophy book a few years ago that was recommended to me by my therapist, I think. It's called I and Thou. Yeah, sometimes your therapist
therapist
recommends philosophy. It's called I and Thou, and it was written by a German philosopher named Martin Buber. So I think the original is like Ich and Du. It's all about how at that time, this is, I think, published in the 1920s. It's a critique of the objectification of human relationships and how people had started essentially relating to other people, especially in the service industry or people that are in lower classes, as not a person and as an it, essentially.
Object,
really.
Yeah,
as an object, really, and not someone that you are ever considering like, oh, this is another human with a fully lived experience, with a mother and a father, with relationships and all that, blah 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 blah, and just sort of deconstructing that development that had been taking place in, I guess, the early 20th century, and saying like, hey, you know, we're all fucking people here, so let's please treat each other like we're all fucking people here.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that like for some like that starts in the 20th century, the earliest 20th century, just because of the fact that like thinking about like going all the way back to like slavery, like they didn't consider slaves people. They like, you were objects, you were sold, you were 3/5 of a person, all that kind of stuff. And then when other like forces started joining the working class and stuff and started having to work service industry jobs, they're like, oh, well, you are equated to this nothing because of the fact that this is like what slaves used to do. And like that being such a big part of it, and like being like, oh, any service kind of job, anything that you're doing that is providing and like helping someone else is now means that you're nothing, which is so interesting because you are providing a lot of care. And to be the person who provides care somehow makes it mean that you aren't as deserving of care yourself is such an interesting thing.
And that it's required in capital. That dehumanization is required because that's the only way for people to be okay with their pursuit of capital, to be able to separate from folks who are of the working class, folks who are just giving their labor for free, because you have to be able, like, I think any human, like our real human force, which I think is us as artists, and I love what you said in your bio, is like our job is to reawaken people to those, our natural forces, our spiritual connections, but you have to detach from that. Otherwise you're like, wait, I'm stealing from you? Like, people don't want to look that shit in the face. And I really think that's like what kind of basically happens is like, I can't actually look you in the eye because I know on a certain level, like I'm stealing from you. Like, I am stealing from you. We're calling it wage labor, but I'm stealing from you.
Right.
And it also allows us to deconstruct the violent myths of capitalism, like, you know, fast food workers don't deserve a living wage because it's just burger flipping or whatever, you know, like all of these fucking violent myths that were created, like you're saying, Rib, to justify this system and to justify the dehumanization of certain types of labor and the people who do them. So yeah, this could be the whole pod.
Yeah.
Except we are gonna have to get to this film because I can't even tell you how excited I was when you were like, we're doing this movie. And you mentioned the celebrity culture and celebrity obsession and how that's dying now, but this film is the height of that shit.
peak.
We have not gone far in many ways, but in some ways we fucking have, because this movie.
Yeah, we've made a ton of progress as a society since the release of Rat Race. My God.
Yeah. I like picked it because I was like, oh, like let me pick a film like I'm kind of familiar with, like from the list and stuff. And I was like, oh, Rat Race, I remember that movie. And I was like, oh, I feel like that is like ripe for critique. And then when I rewatched it, I was like, well, well. But then I was also like, it's so crazy. Like when I say they don't make movies like that anymore, like aside from just like any of the really problematic things that are just like, sprinkled in there, it's just the like craziness and the absurdness of this, like essentially kind of like a road trip movie that like happened, that I was like, whoa, like there's so much going on.
Yeah, it's like some of this should be illegal. All right, before we fully dive in, let's give a little info on the movie. So, as you know, we are discussing the 2001 film Rat Race, directed by Jerry Zucker, written by Andy Breckman, loosely based on the film It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, written by Tanya and William Rose. This movie, Rat Race, stars an all-star cast of 2001, and this is like one of the most 2001 casts I've ever seen. So we got Breckin Meyer, Amy Smart, Whoopi Goldberg, Lene Chapman, Seth Green, Vince Veiloof, John Lovitz, Kathy Najimy, Rowan Atkinson, Wayne Knight, Cuba Gooding Jr., and John Cleese. The budget for this movie was $48 million, made about $85 million worldwide. The synopsis for this movie, if you've never seen it, and we will be doing spoilers, also, who cares? This movie is ridiculous. It doesn't matter if it is spoiled for you. So, after winning a special gold coin in a Las Vegas casino, 6 different groups of people are told that they've been entered into a race from Las Vegas to Silver City, New Mexico, in which the prize is $2 million in cash, and there are no rules in terms of lying, cheating, or stealing to be the first to arrive in Silver City. Little do they know that the casino owner has invited a group of international high rollers to bet on the outcome of this elaborate horse race, or should I say, rat race.
All right, some historical context for this movie. It was released on August 17th, 2001. Spoiler, 1 month before 9/11.
I feel like if this movie hadn't gotten released before 9/11, whoever the distributor would have just been like, just fucking can it. No one needs this right now.
Toss it.
Yeah, just toss it. Just toss it in the trash. We don't. This is not what the country needs.
This is a bad idea. Like.
Other movies that we covered from this year were Josie and the Pussycats and Zoolander. That January, George W. Bush was inaugurated as the 43rd president of the United States. In April, the musical The Producers by Mel Brooks, starring Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, opens on Broadway at the St. James Theater. In October, the first iPod was released by Apple, and many firsts and big franchises are released this year, including the first Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and Fast and the Furious films.
Wow. Jam-packed year.
So you began to tell us a little bit about this, Thalia, but why this movie for this podcast?
What I remembered before I rewatched the movie was that these people were going through so much to get this money. I couldn't remember how much money they were like gunning for, right? Like I remembered Whoopi Goldberg. I remembered the two brothers, the one who had like the bad tongue ringing infection, and I remembered them just like going through it for some money. And I like was thinking about like the ways that like we all go through like these like more mundane kind of like issues or like things to try and like make a check. But then also I thought about Mr. Beast, that guy online who does like all those competitions and stuff, and how much like people go through to like win some money from him because he has, I don't know where his money comes from. I have no idea, but like he has so much money to be like, oh, what if we put, people ages 1 through 100 in a room and like whoever is the last one gets like $1 million. Like he does a lot of stuff like that all the time, or like giving away money all the time. And it just made me think like, oh, this is like a good like anti-capitalism thing, because how do we move away from these things that are essentially just like kind of trying to humiliate poorer people to get them to be like rich, and like this idea of like you have to sacrifice almost, quote unquote, to have any sort of wealth, but the sacrifice that you're making as someone who doesn't come from this wealth is far different than someone who family is used to having a lot of blood on their hands, I guess you could say.
Yeah, the point of the humiliation that really stood out to me in this watch of like
Yeah.
how much that was actually consciously interwoven into the script. Yeah, I had a similar thing. I remembered when you gave us this movie, I was like, I know I remember this movie, but I was like, Rat Race, that was one of my favorite movies in 7th grade. Couldn't remember a thing. And then turned it on, and like it was just like getting hit in the face with all of these. And I was like, "Oh my God, of course, the squirrel lady, the Rowan Atkinson's
Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates, the heart that he loses this live heart in the car. Like, so much insane
shit.
And it feels like when I work with writing in the best way, like with my middle schoolers, and we're like, let's write a play together. Like this feels like where you're just like, and then you know what happens? Out of nowhere, these cows are there, and then he gets smacked in the face with an udder, and then you know what happens? These girls come along, and you're just like where anything goes, and yet they do tie it together, and it's like I found it to be blissfully wild. And you said it, like they don't make movies like this anymore. Nor am I necessarily advocating that they should.
Right. Like we could leave it behind.
It
It's
was
okay.
also like, yeah, the first 5 seconds jaw on the floor, like, wait, what? I mean, it has all the Y2K, like the gender jokes, like the sex change jokes where you're just like, oh, obsessed. Those movies were, you're just like, everyone was so obsessed with it. So much of that grossness.
And it's so interesting because I feel like for whatever reason, that was the first time that like people's like notions of like trans people, people's notions of like Black people were like coming into like the zeitgeist in like a major way, aside from like the people who already lived those lives, which was like the only way that people knew how to like put this into like mainstream culture was to make fun of it, which I was like, that's so crazy to me. But then again, it like comes from this thing of just like people who we see as like at the bottom.
Yeah.
You know, like we're allowed to make fun of them. They're allowed to be the butt of the joke, and like they're allowed to be the ones who are like scraping and crimping trying to get money.
Yes. Yeah. This movie is completely dated by its sense of humor. I have a list that I'm looking at I think maybe like, I don't know, 20 different bits or jokes or one-liners where I'm like, well, couldn't fucking do that today. Shouldn't fucking do that today. Shouldn't have done this back then. That is one of the most offensive things I've ever seen in a movie. But similarly to Rivka, 7th grade when this came out, this movie was on repeat in the Capello household all the time. We had the DVD. This was a regular fixture. This was like, yeah, we got nothing to do. Throw on Rat Race. Let's watch all those watch all these zany characters just like try to compete for all of this money. But I joked before about how like coming out right before 9/11, but this does really feel like the end of the 2000s. Like it has like this really like carefree, like who cares? All we got to worry about is, competing in these competitions and trying to win a little money for themselves. It's like peak neoliberalism, especially from this era, especially with this humor, because it feels like there's nothing, like this movie has no real opinion about anything that's happening contextually, like why these people want this money so bad, why they're willing to compete in this ridiculous rat race, and also no real opinions about the rich people other than like they're rich, they like to have fun. It's really like lacking in any sort of politics. I mean, not that I'm expecting politics from fucking Rat Race, but I mean the closest thing we get to is like rich people like to play games with poor people, and poor people are desperate for money because they're poor. That's kind of like the most we get out of it, even though not everyone that's competing in this race is actually poor. So
yeah, which is so interesting because when I was watching it, I was like rewatching it, I was like thinking, oh, like we don't really get anyone's backstory for real except for Cuban Gooding Jr.'s character, where like he's not necessarily someone I would consider like a poor person. He's like a ref for for a football team, like for football. So he's just like running away from his issues. And I guess when you're running away, like $2 million does help. Like, you can't scoff at that.
That was the other thing about the 2001. I'm like, $2 million. Okay, thanks for like, I don't know, a down payment on a house. Great. This is so helpful in 2024.
Right. Like, I'm like, okay, like, I guess we're going to do something. Not everything, but we're gonna get something done.
You know, it's wild because I was like, isn't this The Amazing Race? And I was like, isn't this actually The Amazing Race? So I looked it up, and The Amazing Race came out, I think it was where I wrote down a note of it. The Amazing Race came out in September. So like right after this movie
Wow.
came out, The Amazing Race came out, and it's just, yeah, it's one of those things because yes, it doesn't have politics, but I think it just inherently, I kind of felt like they didn't even need an opinion because it was just so clear that you're like, they're humiliating these people. And I thought the humiliation factor, which we'll get into with like the games that they play while they're waiting for the race, because also this couldn't have happened now because GPS, like for anyone who wasn't alive during this time, like, yeah, you didn't have GPS. So like they're just trying to get to Silver Springs, New Mexico without any maps or access.
Yeah.
So they're figuring it out as they go. They have like physical maps. Anyways, so during that time, which takes a while, all the international billionaires are being entertained by playing like little games of humiliation, which that humor actually reminded me of your play in the best way, and like the fun and games element. And it also reminded me of, I was like, Squid Games feels like Squid Games.
Yeah.
People
Yeah,
probably
I
don't
wrote- I
talk
wrote
about
down
that,
Squid
but I was like,
Games.
Squid Games, I guess, is the like more intense artsy version of Rat Race. There's the one part where they have the maids holding on, and it's so short, but I was like, that is wild and a great image. They have the maids holding on.
That was it.
And then they had another one amongst each other, I guess, to get the guy to throw up.
They're betting on which chocolate Mr. Grisham would eat out of the box.
Right.
And then they bet on who's gonna barf first on the private jet, which that was kind of funny because they were at least like they were the subject. The rich people themselves were the subjects of their own bet, because that's the thing that really was shitty. And then the last one, the most offensive one, is betting on what the sex worker is going to charge for the ridiculous Pepto-Bismol party that Mr. Grisham pitches to her.
Which I
Yeah.
thought those storylines were the most fascinating, because there was also like this hierarchy inside of the capital class, like Mr. Grisham. Even there, you had the people who were serving them. I mean, yeah, they had to barf between each other, but they had the people on the plane who, in order to make that happen, just were putting themselves in grave danger. Like they could have crashed the plane. And I thought that was a great image of how the insanity of trying to get that much money can just lead you to do crazier and crazier things, because there is no there in Capital. Like it has everybody under its spell. You know, he's like, I'm an eccentric man, but I think even his character at the end is like, I don't know what any of this is for, that they're willing to come that close to death just because they need to feel something, perhaps because they're so desensitized from their own humanity.
Yeah, they're so rich, like there's nothing that phases them in a sense. So they have to literally make shit up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I also thought about that in the way that when they first like brought them all into the room, and he's just like, okay, this is a race, go. And they're just like, no, like, what are the rules? Like, what are we supposed to be doing? He's like, there's no rules. And for him to be like the rich that he is means that he doesn't live in a world with rules.
Right.
Yeah.
So he's like, what are you talking about? There's rules. Like, no, just go and do what I just told you to do. Like, aren't you excited about the money? And they're just like, no, there has to be a caveat. I've never lived a life without a caveat, because I don't live a life with like enough wealth where like I'm so bored that I can just do whatever I want, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought that was really just like an interesting thing throughout, just like the idea of like who has rules, who doesn't, who has to adhere, who doesn't, who gets to make the rules, who has to follow them, you know?
Yeah.
Oh, totally. Also, just the amount of money and wealth that these guys, and it's all men, I think, all of the high rollers,
Yeah.
how much money they are just throwing around. Like when you are that obscenely wealthy, just being like, yeah, I'll go to Vegas and bet $2 million on this like ridiculous human horse race. And if I lose that $2 million, no sweat off of my back. It's so obscene and so disgusting. I'm honestly thinking right now, like if anyone, I don't know. I feel like if you go into a Vegas casino and you bet more than $5 million on something, you should be immediately guillotined and your money just like taken away from you.
Right, redistribute that.
Yeah, if you have that much money that you were just literally
Yeah, it's
throwing away on a
disgusting.
fucking sports game or something, like I don't know. I think you're probably one of the worst kind of people on this planet.
No, truly, because like, what do you mean? Like, you had nothing else you could do with that? With everything going on in the world, you thought of nothing else. That's silly.
It's
Like-
so, yeah. And not only that, I'm realizing they're pissing away all this money this entire movie, but it's soon at the end that they find out that their money has to be used for good for the Feed the Earth concert. They're all like, no, my money. It's
All of a sudden, it's not okay.
yeah, no, like I already lost $10 million today betting on stupid bullshit, but like you're telling me that this money's going to go to poor people? No. So I guess that's
Can't have
actually
it.
Cannot have it. So I guess that's actually pretty good critique of the rich.
I loved the end, but I don't know if I was having like also a euphoric head explosion at the end with Smash Mouth coming out and just being like, I was like, what is happening? I don't know if I'm okay. And then I got on the train. I'm not even kidding, because I did finish watching this morning, which was great. Was a great start to my day. And then I get on the train and I bump into someone from middle school, and it was a lot. I was like, am I in 7th grade? Have I been transported?
It's like, wait.
Where
Did you stop
I?
them? Did you stop them? And
Of
you're like, do you
course.
remember Rat Race? Like,
I
can
did.
we
We
talk
didn't get
about
to
it?
Rat Race because there was like suddenly, and not only that, there was like some middle school drama to be like discussed.
Oh,
I got
damn.
some middle school gossip. Like I had it. Yeah, it was a pretty great day.
I do want to say I watched this movie on a plane ride back from LA, but I had to download it to my computer to watch it. So anyone sitting around me on the plane saw me, a grown man, not watching any of the movies on the headrest, the amazing selection of new releases, and opening up my laptop to play 2001's Rat Race. And I was just like, I'm gonna end up on TikTok. This is unhinged behavior. Like, I'm just like looking around. I'm like, it's for a podcast. I swear, I'm not
That
just...
made it better.
You're right. They said, take away the mic. I was thinking, I was like, someone on Amazon is like, why did 3 people buy Rat Race to watch? That's weird. Like, what the fuck?
The first 3 people in 10 years to rent Rat Race.
They're just like, okay.
Back to this cast, because there were movies like this all the time being made where you're just seeing so many stars being thrown, and it really was the peak of celebrity obsession. I know that we're still in it, and then the influencer thing and the reality TV totally changed the landscape and like what was going on. But it was like the peak of like when movie stars were movie stars, and they're just like, how many can we throw in to make sure people come see this? Which didn't work for this movie because it wasn't like a box office success at the time. I think it flunked, but still.
I mean, it made its money back.
Yeah. Well, I guess critically, I mean, who cares? You know, of course not. The critics weren't like, Rat Race.
They're like, no, you have to go see this.
But it's just, even the end of the movie, I think, reflects it, because once the capitalists finally are like, okay, we'll match the 2 million, you know, they see the crowd of people at this and Smashbox and everyone like, you gotta give your money.
Smashbox.
And they decide to do it in the crowd. Well, I wrote down a note because they cheat. They're like, this is the billionaire. This guy's a billionaire, and everyone cheers for him. And I just felt like I know there are places that would happen in this country, but generally I think that tone is shifting. I think you'd have at least a good portion of the crowd who would not be just wildly screaming because someone's a billionaire, like,
right.
We love you. But that was the vibe of the reaction from the crowd, and I think that was that vibe of that time. And I just think watching it was such a validation of, this is what I inherited culturally. This movie was so brainwashing. Like, I just felt like, yes, we love money. Like, that was kind of the takeaway as a kid, was we love money. Money's fun. It's fun to have it, but you want to be rich enough to give it, at least be rich enough to give it away, which also made the charity critique a little interesting too, of like, well, I want money so I can be the one to give it away and Smashbox will cheer me, you know? It's like,
yeah.
Riv, it is Smash Mouth, just a heads up.
Oh my God.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all, but I'm just letting you know, and so that
My
the listeners know
millennial
that
card shall be taken from me.
No,
But yeah,
this
only a specific generation will know the difference.
I mean, when they rolled into a Smash Mouth concert, my head exploded. I was like, "Oh my God! I of course this is of course this is the final set piece. Of course."
I was like sitting there and I was like, is that Smash Mouth? Like, there's no way. And then I was like, it's always Smash Mouth. What am I talking about? Like, I'm
It's
wrong.
always,
Mhm.
it's always them.
Always them. Like, it's not supposed to be anyone else. Like, they're down.
Well, it's them and it's the Baha Men. Let's not
Yeah.
forget.
Oh.
Who Let the Dogs Out does play a central role as a needle drop in the opening race scene, and that was another like brain melt. I was like, oh my God, I haven't heard this fucking song. And then I was like, the opening credits song, which was an original song about Rat Race, I said, who wrote this piece of shit? Also the Baha Men, it turns out.
Oh.
So
They were working.
So
They were working hard.
They were working. Yep. Hot commodity.
Wow, wow,
Right.
wow. Yeah, I think it was the first time I kind of started to get how millennials could be cringy as a child. I was like, I see some things I don't like.
Riv, to touch on what you were just saying before about this obsession with money that kind of just shines through in this movie and in this time is what I was trying to articulate before, which is just like from like the 80s pretty much up until the financial crash, class politics were completely gone. They were completely like out of the zeitgeist. It was like almost like gauche or taboo to talk about class.
It was like unions, that was so 1970s.
Exactly.
Right.
So what we were reduced to is this neoliberal order where it's just, some people have money and some people don't. And it's probably because the rich people are smarter and better, and the poor people are lazy and stupid. So that's the best explanation that we can give to you. Like, don't read Karl Marx. Don't read it. No. That guy, no. One of the worst people in history.
He's mean. Karl Marx is mean. Like,
Yeah, he's mean.
He's mean. He talked about communism. He's mean.
yeah.
He had a stinky beard, and it always had food stuck in it.
Yeah, he's not cute. Don't talk to him.
No, but it was like really just like reduced to this idea of just like, the rich are the rich and the poor are the poor. And that's how it's gotta be. And that's how it's always gotta be.
And do you want to be rich or do you want to be poor?
Start being rich.
Start being rich.
Riv, I love the finance bro character that you've been developing since our margin call episode. Yeah, we just come in and you're like, you want to be a fucking pussy or a fucking high roller?
Yeah.
Like, it's really strong. I think it should be a recurring.
It's the messaging is working. All these movies and like, yeah.
Like, I see it. I was even thinking about like the each of like the racers, like specifically, and like while I was watching it, I was like, oh, who's like making a specific point? And I don't feel like any of them are making too specific of a point, or at least not one that I can like articulate. But I'm thinking about, I can't remember his like actual name, but the guy who in the opening scene is like, I didn't watch any of those pornos, that guy, and how he was so like Breckenmeyer. Yeah, he was very much like, I'm not participating, I'm not joining, I'm above this. And then when he realizes that he actually has a chance, then he like buys all in. And like, what does that mean about like people? Like, what does that just mean about like what it means to like seek wealth? Like, are you only accepting of your circumstances because you think that you don't have the means to get anything different? Or once like something shows up, an opportunity shows up, you're willing to do whatever it takes? Because he's shown as like this like super straight-laced kind of guy. A little bit of question with it because of the whole like, oh, you watched, Afro Horrors or, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Which
First
was
lines
crazy.
of the movie. They turned it on and I'm like,
I was like,
absolutely
whoa.
wild.
And he's like, no, I didn't. She's like, you watched it at 2:15, 2:30, like, whoa. But
can you imagine
basically,
if that
him being
actress
like,
didn't do anything else and her whole reel is just that scene?
I'd hire her.
She was honestly pretty good.
Yeah, because she was like, you sure?
Yeah, the side eye was strong.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'd hire her again. But yeah, like, but like, yeah, he very much was just like supposed to be this guy who's like on this very like quote unquote like straight and narrow, as much as it like, is shown about him and like his like backstory. He didn't gamble at all while he was there. They're like, you're so afraid of doing anything wrong because you want to be like attorney general and whatnot. But once he had the opportunity, like, and he saw like a real pathway to like being like, oh, I could have wealth, like real wealth, he was like so all in and started doing arguably some of the crazier stuff than like anybody else who wasn't positioned to like, he was positioned as like this like really, really quote unquote great guy, and then was immediately like, no, like, let's take this helicopter, let's attack your boyfriend with the helicopter, let's go siphon gas from a police car, like, let's go. Like, he was so all in. It was really interesting to see and track those different things for each character.
Well, they also do the shitty thing, and I wanted to mention this at some point, that his development, his character arc is also sparked by him meeting Amy Smart, the attractive female pilot, and then we come to find out that they, the classic shitty comedy movie trope of like, oh, she's a little off her rocker. She's like, she's violent. She's
jealous.
She's jealous of her boyfriend of 5 months cheating on her, and so is going to destroy his home. Like, oh my God,
with the helicopter.
Wild. with a helicopter, like this wild and crazy woman. And they do that shitty thing where it's like, well, you know, he's really horny for her, so maybe he's gonna like break the rules. And it is very, very, very one-dimensional character development. Every character has basically like one detail about their life that like sets them up for the rest of the movie. Nothing else other than that. I was actually, if you said like there was no character that's like above it, now that I'm thinking about it, I think maybe Rowan Atkinson as Enrico Polini is probably the purest of the racers.
But he, of all of them, wants the race the most because he has this classic line, which that hit. I was like, oh my God, I think I used to say this all the time. Where he passes
I mean, that
them
race.
I'm reading. I was like, oh my God, I think this used to be my personality. Oh no. Like, did I run around camp saying this? I'm pretty sure I did, or whatever. Like the streets of Brooklyn, how horrifying. But he was, yes, very pure, but he still purely wanted that money. I mean, he was in it for the race because remember at the very top, they're like, maybe we should split it. And they like pause and he's the one who passes them and goes, it's a race. I'm winning.
Sure.
Right.
I mean,
I feel like his was still innocent though, right? Just in the sense that he was like very much like, oh, it's a race. Like, I'm here to have fun. Like, I'm enjoying this, like, this toiling. Like, he wasn't like, oh, I'm about to win $2 million. He's like, I'm about to win a race. I'm going fast, you know? And he was just like,
he doesn't really talk about the money.
And he didn't have his mom or dad.
My mom, she is gone.
Oh my God. I think it's because also he's a clown. Like to be honest, his work in this movie is phenomenal. Like his clown work is amazing. And it doesn't belong in this movie, but it works. You know, you're like, there's so much purity and truth in what he's doing. This art form of like clowning and commedia in Rat Race.
At certain points, I was like, is this offensive to Italian people? Like,
you tell us, Frank. Were you offended?
Were you like, whoa?
I was kind of blown away. I was like, this is over the top. But I mean, what else were we to expect from Mr. Bean, you know? No,
it probably is a little. I'm sure it's offensive.
I'm sure there were Italian people that saw this and were like this fucking English man making fun of us, you know, because he's an English actor.
Well,
but
and also having everyone, I think, with all of these movies that had lines like that, and you're like, now all of these kids are out here butchering it, and it's like, I probably shouldn't have been running around being like, you know, it's a me Mario. Like, you're just saying things now that are a whole culture, and you've just deduced it to one line that you think is going to make your friends laugh. You know?
Yeah, Mr. Bean in this movie, this like the 2001 lineup of this cast, because it's like, I remember the marketing of this movie was like, we've got all of the biggest stars of 2001 specifically, like Breckin Meyer, Seth Green, Mr. Bean, John Lovitz, Cuba Gooding Jr. I did feel bad for Cuba. I was like, because like what happened with Cuba Gooding Jr., because he wins the Oscar in like the late 90s for Jerry Maguire. And then I remember like pretty quickly it was like, oh,
I think
Cuba.
This was still his hot point because it's only 2001.
It's only 2001, but then like somewhere around this time is when it's like Cuba Gooding Jr. is not like, we don't put him in serious movies anymore.
Well,
you know
I did
what I mean?
a movie
like,
with him.
That's
I
right.
was scene with him.
Oh,
That's right.
I was in prison and he was reprimanding me because I was the bad girl. And yes, correct, he was. But I will say, if I tell people of a certain age, they're like, I don't know who that is.
Exactly my point.
Yeah. I think what happened was like he had like some like personal like issues after winning that Oscar. Like I think it was like a addiction sort of like issues or like something.
Oh, okay.
And then like people were just kind of like, all right, Cuba, like let's distance ourselves kind of thing, sadly. But
well, there are some allegations of
that's a huge
assault,
bummer.
but I think that came even later.
Yeah,
but I do know he has a very similar upbringing to Michael Jackson in the sense that came from an entertainment family and from a family where like this was your work. And even at the premiere, we had like his parents were there, which was what, you know, but like managers might like. So I think there was also I'm sure there was some of that too, because he was pretty young when, and Jerry Maguire was a huge movie.
Yeah, show me the money.
And that was like that was like a huge deal. So yeah, I can only imagine it would be hard to follow that up. That was like a cultural moment with him winning.
Yeah.
But even his character in this film, he like goes through like a fall of grace also. Just because like he's in trouble with like the whole football viewing community because of this like shitty call that he made. And now everyone sees him and is like, you're that guy. Like, you're that guy who lost me money. And also that being like really prevalent throughout the movie. Like everywhere he went, someone was like, I know you, I know your face. And everyone is like, I lost money because of you. That was just felt like interesting to me. Like the guy the taxi driver who like dropped him off in the desert and stole his clothes because he lost
attempted
20 grand.
murder.
And right. Yeah, like that's murder. That's wrong.
For sure.
Like okay, like I was like, they show you the scene where he's just like freaking out with like the coin, and I was just like, if I was standing there and I have all these like freaking huge football dudes around me yelling at me to make a call, I too would choke. I too would get really nervous. Maybe, have some grace.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like the first victim of cancel culture.
Yeah. That's not nice.
But I think you're making a good point about like the gambling, because that is a theme in this. And I didn't notice that there's the gambling. He flips the coin. They're all at the casino. Each one of them in their story has some relationship to gambling. Either they're not supposed to do it if they're the husband, or, that it's this taboo thing. But I do think if this movie is accidentally making a larger political point, it's that there is no option. We are all gambling under capitalism. That is the only option. That is the only choice anybody has unless you're the capitalist. Either you're gambling and you're in their game, or like you're the one with the money just throwing it out and haha. So the gambling theme was important. And I mean, I do think Cuba's storyline had some really great points. I do like funny moments. I thought the Lucille Ball bus was like, that was a great.
The Lucy bus was fun.
That was amazing.
Until they made the trans Lucy joke, like the Lucy bus.
I know,
was fun.
and then that came, and you're like, and you did it. You ruined it.
You're like, wow.
Thank you, 2000.
Like, you're like, wow, that was so easy for you to fuck that up. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And Jerry Seinfeld's like, please, like, you can't make good jokes anymore.
You can't make Rat Race anymore. No one's making Rat Race. No, there are, like, no exaggeration, like 4 or 5 transphobic jokes in this movie. It's, like, really, really wild. Although it makes sense, because it's, like, that's, at this time, like, that's the group that's still socially acceptable to punch down against. So, I'm not too surprised.
It also felt, in watching this movie, particularly with the way that the jokes were coming up, it felt like there was something that I was like, I feel you trying to say something. Like when those horrible, I felt the culture like you could feel it about to erupt. Something about those jokes in this movie felt so unfunny in the sense that you're like, it's screaming for a need to be expressed. Like you could just feel the oppression just writhing and wriggling in those moments in a way that like other movies, when they come, I don't know, it just felt so desperate to be like freed. Like this culture felt so angry. And those moments felt so angry. And I was like, thank fucking God. I mean, obviously not in most part, but like, thank God, at least in parts of pop culture, we're moving beyond that. We're able to have these conversations. And like, thank God people like Jerry Seinfeld can be like, well, you can't make those jokes anymore. Like, no, because they're not fucking funny. And like, there's something that's begging to be liberated underneath them.
Mm-hmm. It's like I was saying earlier, it's like very interesting because I'm like, oh, this is the first time like people who are in like what we consider like the normal quote unquote like social zeitgeist or whatever are like experiencing transness in any kind of way.
Right.
And their first instinct is to like make fun of it because they don't understand. And like the confusion and anger that they're feeling from this thing that they don't understand, that probably is happening to a lot of people around them. Like, who knows how many people in like the 2000s had their like, you know, trans egg crack, and they're like, oh, I am now going through like transitioning and like all this stuff, who now have to like see all these horrible jokes, and like these people just kind of being like, I have no idea what this means. I have no idea how to understand that. So I'm just going to make fun of it. So they're saying all these like super uneducated things when like what they really should be doing is like, you know, leaning into the curiosity that they're having, because that's what that is, you know, and like trying to be like, oh, like, wait, what is this? Is this like, what is going on here? Like, oh, why is my cousin saying X, Y, and Z? Like, oh, like, why is this person doing X, Y, and Z? And all the times in this film when these jokes came up, it was just so random and had no, like, it was like, we weren't even talking about that. Like, you're obsessed.
Yes. This like clearly clearly like something pathological happening with the screenwriter where he's like, I must fit at least 5 transphobic jokes in this movie, in this studio comedy with this giant
Right.
cast.
Yeah, we weren't even. No, that's such a good point. It would be out of nowhere. You're like, wait a minute, why? Like it was the Lucy thing. And you're like, that was okay. And yet they chose to. I remember I saw a clip where with Jerry Zucker was talking about like there were so many things we had to cut out. And you're like, but that's not what they cut out. But they did cut out a great scene where the Lucy bus stops and runs into a Ricky bus, and I thought
that's fun.
That would have been great.
That's very fun.
And it's a great scene. You can Google it, but they chose to cut that and keep the
I mean, when the bus like loses the wheel and then tips over and crashes, and all of the Lucys start like wahing all together, I'm like, that's great. This is fun.
The other thing that I thought was like very successful humor that I laughed out loud, and I think one of the better plot lines was John Lovett's family storyline where they end up at the Barbie museum because they think it's Barbie, but it's
Klaus Barbie.
It's Klaus Barbie, and they're this Jewish family. And like that humor, I just was like the whole way through thought it was hysterical and really worked. And also that family storyline I thought was a great critique of capitalism because he has his wife and kids and he's just like destroying their lives in this pursuit towards money. And the kids keep saying, like the little girl says, she's like, once he comes out and he's like, it's not a job that I have in New Mexico, it's this $2 million, and so do you want to keep going? And she's like, no, this has been a living hell, Dad. Like I don't give a fuck, this is a living hell, which is like the most honest thing said in the film. And what does he do in response? He drugs his kids.
Drugs them. And he literally goes, oh, you think we're in hell? Like, we could go further.
It feels so American, too. Like, I just feel like it's the most American. And I imagine when people think about America, like, you know, when you travel, I'm like, oh, I imagine people are thinking rat race. Like, that's our vibe.
Yeah. I thought like the John Lovett's character, I can't believe I'm saying this, but I thought the John Lovett's character had like the most to say about the desperation of working class folks and like what they are willing to put themselves and their families through to try to just achieve some economic stability or like wealth. I'm sure it's like past like, just being stable, but he's the gambling addict. He's the one that's like sneaking away to go gamble because he's like, any moment could be my big break. And once he actually tells his family that it's a race, and I wrote this line down where he's like, I want to get there first. I do not want to work at Home Depot.
Right.
And that I thought was like, I get it. And not to say that like working at Home Depot is bad. Like I've never worked at Home Depot, but what we're saying is that like the people who work at Home Depot should be paid like a very good living wage for the work that they're doing, the labor that they're doing. So like his character, I thought like actually had something to say about, I don't know, working class struggle, desperation, this hope, this like pie in the sky hope for just like lucking out and becoming rich one day.
Yeah. He was the most hungry from the very start. Once he knew that this was a race and like could happen, he was the first one to be like, oh, well, I guess the elevator's not coming. I'm going to take the stairs as like his like way of just like getting forward and like getting ahead. And just even thinking about the way that he didn't even tell his wife, like that's what he was doing. Like that's what they were about to journey on. He was about to leave them.
Yeah.
To go and like try and win this money too, like, and not say shit to them was so interesting also.
Has his daughter stick her butt out a moving car window because he doesn't want to stop for her to go to the bathroom.
Friend, like, what are you doing?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like abusive, and they're parroting it. But I do think it's like how there's so many like, and I guess because it's so American, it's like that American idea of the like 4-person family and the road trip, but like it turns it on its head, and you see like this grotesque part of that. But I think a lot of road trips are probably ruined by either the stress that a parent has of like, we're paycheck to paycheck, or I have to put this all on a credit card, and I don't know. Just like how those things ruin so many vacations or times that you're supposed to be with a family because there's all of these stressors, and how much I just think about how many fights have happened in my home around money and just things that like affect a childhood when you're like, we're just want to have a good time. But because of capitalism, like it's almost impossible for families to move past paycheck to paycheck, and that's going to cause fights. And that's the real trauma and the real horrific stuff. And I'm sure there are kids who, I mean, not in this like parody way, who have had to like not go to the bathroom, hold basic needs because it's like, no, we as a family have to get here now because I have to make sure I have to make it to work. I have, in the very serious sense. I'm sure there were times in my childhood that I could pull out if I did right now, where you're like, oh yeah, I wasn't able to be a kid because we had to make sure we got there. We had to make sure this happened.
That's such a good point. I've never thought about that before. It's making me realize that any time my family went on vacation, like my parents would immediately become angry, like, or not angry, but just like be in a shitty mood,
stressed,
and like
yeah.
stressed. And something we would hear them say is like, you're driving around, you go to like a park, you go to a theme park, whatever it is that you're doing, just hearing them say like, this is so fucking expensive. This is so fucking expensive. Like, this is so much goddamn money. And it's like, you absorb that as a child for sure. You're like, this is stressful. We don't have to be on this vacation if it means that you're gonna,
if we're not having fun.
Yeah.
Well, even like the first scene that we see them in, he was like, see, we didn't need a bellhop. And she's like, yeah, you've found another way to avoid giving a tip. And he even mentions like, this is like what their first vacation, like 3 years or something, which is like crazy. Yeah. Well, like crazy in the sense that like you're toiling away, working so hard and you have no chance for leisure at all.
Right. And that's normalized. I feel like that is like the normal American thing is like, well, yeah, the rich guys get to do that, and like we get to do a vacation once in a while that we're gonna be stressed out about. See David fucking Copperfield,
right?
David Copperfield.
I'm also two of my favorite characters, like oddly enough, is Seth Green and the like man who plays his brother. I don't know. I can't explain why I like them. I couldn't put that into real words or anything. But when I'm thinking about like who's the hungriest, those two were like, they literally went, if we can't have it, nobody can have it. And they stood on that very, very seriously. And like knowing that this movie is like right before like 9/11 in the way that it was.
Oh my God.
That makes everything that happened in the airport even crazier.
Holy shit. You're absolutely right.
Like, whoa.
They pulled down an air traffic control tower. Like they could have caught like
Wait,
they could
that's
be
crazy.
They could be killing so many people. Like so many mid-air collisions probably happened because of these two fucknuts, these two like dumbass con men.
Trying to get $2 million.
$2 million.
Just two. Not even like enough to like fix the lives of the people like that they just ruined,
I mean, you're blowing my mind because airlines changed so drastically. I mean, I guess I'm saying this, I'm like being an old person now. I'm like, for anyone who's listening who's never, but I do remember old. I was like, we were in 8th grade, but I do remember like prior flying. Yeah, probably it was pretty lax. Like someone probably could have done what those two brothers did.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like I'm just like, holy crap, like whoa. But they also have this like this line like right after they take that in that tower where the guy's looking at his ID, is like, where's your ID from? He's like, Guam. I'm like, what is going on with you two? Like that's a backstory that I was like, this is so weird and mysterious, because even their opening scene is them like trying to pull an insurance like scam kind of thing where he's like, you're gonna slip on the glass and you're gonna fall, and then we're gonna get this money. Then this other lady happens like slip and fall, and that lawyer who keeps popping up is like, I'm a lawyer, I'm here to help you.
That actually made me laugh both times. That was Gloria Allred, who was a famous lawyer from that time. She especially she represented a bunch of women in high profile cases. From my limited understanding, is like a very good, renowned, well-known lawyer. So when she popped up, she's like, hi, I'm Gloria Allred, a lawyer. And then later when Wayne Knight hits Enrico with the bus, and she's like, I saw everything. And Wayne Knight's like, oh shit, Gloria Allred. I was like, that's funny.
We gotta go.
That's pretty good.
I think you're onto something, Talia, though, because I really felt for them too. And I do think, wow, as we're unpacking this movie, I do think it has more layers than originally caught the eye, because it's pretty amazing. They capture this other element where, okay, if you're not, you have to gamble under capitalism, and you got to scam. And I think it's why the scamming stories, especially recently, are so desirable and we're so affected by them, because people are starting to be like, I guess actually these scammers are onto something, because the biggest scam is capitalism. So if we're being scammed, we might as well scam them back. I don't know anyone who hasn't. That's not true. I don't know. This is very hyperfluous, but I know a lot of people who have said out loud, like recently in recent days, yeah, I wonder wonder if I could sue someone because I don't fucking know how I'm going to retire. I think we're at a place in capitalism where people are like, if I could sue someone, I would. I mean, I got deeply poisoned and I had said out loud, and believe me, I wouldn't, it wasn't worth it. And I'm not getting any money because that's how it goes down. But I just related to these guys being like, let's come up with scams and then it not working. But what else are you going to do? You know, like that's where our brains are at this point. And you're like, I don't really know a better idea because work as we know it is crumbling. People who were like, you know, you could just get a job at like do a safe job. Those safe jobs are also disappearing. So thankfully being an artist, I'm like, I always was okay with the lack of stability, but scamming sounds kind of reasonable.
And there's so much more like influx of like people doing scams and like scamming. Like we get all these like phishing emails, all this stuff so often.
Yeah. I think it's people recognizing that we are in a highly competitive bullshit system where it is, as we are told, like dog eat dog, it's all a rat race. So I think the scam culture is just like, I'm recognizing how shitty this system is and I'm going to play this game in the way that is like either the easiest or like the most beneficial, or I can make the most money as quickly as possible without playing by the rules. I mean, scammers are really just like poor hedge fund managers, you know? They're like in a lower echelon. They're in a lower class, but they're essentially doing the same thing that a hedge fund manager is basically an ultra wealthy scammer, you know?
Yeah.
They're future millionaires. They're working hard.
Yeah. And those brothers also really loved each other. Do you remember after they get on the hot air balloon and dragged around with cows and they're trying to get their key back and they get dumped in a swamp and he pops up from the swamp and he hugged him so deeply. I think they even like had a little kiss. It was very sweet. And that was before he knew he had the key. So there were some layers there, some complexity to that relationship.
I also just love that actors like this whole bit with the tongue ring was like really funny to me. It was just like so funny to me. I was just like, take that out. Like, just take it out.
Yeah. My dude, that thing is purple.
It's not working. And they're also the two at the end who, well, just the Seth Green was just kind of like, no, like, we can't give up this money. He was the only one who was like, no, like, I'm not giving it up, and had to be convinced by his brother being like, our mom is looking down at us in heaven. Like, what do you think she would do? And that was like just really interesting in terms of just like, we don't know anybody's like backstory like fully. We just get just enough to be like, oh, like something deep and serious is kind of going on here. And theirs, I feel like, was the most, at least to me, because I'm like, oh, you two have been on your own for who knows how long. You're pictured as people who are like really young, probably in like their like early 20s and stuff. So you're really doing every single thing that it takes to try and just have something, just like something.
Yeah, they probably didn't have like a formal education, you know, like it doesn't seem like they came from means of any kind. Yeah, they're just
certainly
like
no one taught them how to do a proper piercing, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're literally looking at the map and with the planes flying behind them being like, where the fuck is the airport? And you just hear right behind them.
Yeah, they openly discuss the race in front of the hardware key guy. Yeah. While they're discussing discretion, like, I get it. What a funny bit. It's like, hey, we got to not tell anybody about this as we are literally talking about it in front of another person. But yeah, not the brightest bulbs.
The only other storyline we didn't cover was Whoopi Goldberg and her estranged daughter, who
was rich.
Yeah, was
right?
rich.
How do you get a private jet, friend?
Owns her own company, is about to go public.
Just so ambitious.
That was the game of their characters. Was as soon as the daughter finds out that this is a competition, she's super ambitious, super competitive, so she's like, I'm gonna win this. And then the game with her and Whoopi's a mom, so she's gonna she's like an older mom, so like rather she's gonna ask what color the rental car is rather than just saying, yes, give us the rental car. Like, she's gonna talk to the squirrel lady for a little bit too long. That seemed to be like the extent of the game that their characters were playing.
I did laugh very hard though when they get in the
rocket car
that's gonna break the sound barrier.
Yeah.
They get out and their hair is like all wired. Like, they look like they just broke the sound barrier and they're like, we took a rocket car. And so a bus of, I guess, people in a psych ward picks them up. It's so silly. But her being like, we got here by a rocket car, it just hit. I don't know.
For me, it was Whoopi's line where someone was like, I think it was her daughter who was just like, oh, this seems like a scam. She goes, oh, I love a scam. And she was just like all in, like for all the wrong reasons, which I think is also an interesting thing because her and her daughter, their dynamic was like interesting to me, just in the sense that like she was like, oh yeah, my psychic Lucy Ann told me that you were stressed and you're having money troubles and this, and her daughter was just kind of like, a fucking psychic like is looking at her like, you can't be serious right now. And her kind of like this happy-go-lucky feeling person who we have no idea what her financial status is, but we can only assume that she's like good/okay because of the fact that she is so happy-go-lucky and is just like willing to participate, you know, like she's just like there along for the ride. Whereas like the daughter is like, I came here to win. I'm a winner. I am a businesswoman. I am this strong person. And like thinking about that and like the larger critique of just like capitalism and stuff, like her daughter who's used to being like, I am an achiever. I can win. I will be this. I am a capitalist. I'm just not that level of capitalist, versus Whoopi, who's someone who's like, I had to give you up because I was a victim of capitalism. Like I did not have the means to take care of you. And that being like part of her story, and her now kind of being like, I don't know if you could say like, she's like, I'm done being a victim, but more so I'm trying to rectify the things that happened to me because of capitalism is what it felt like.
Wait, is this the next reboot for the American theater?
Oh my god,
that would be. Could you imagine Rat Race the musical? Like,
this will save American theater, the stage version of Rat Race. This is what we need.
We have to bring Smash Mouth. Yeah.
And if we can't get them, we'll call them Smashbox. Like they lived rent-free in my head for all those years.
The last thing I wanted to touch on was like the ending, which I like didn't love like the rest of the movie, but they crash into the Smash Mouth concert. It's actually a charity concert for Feed the Earth. And then all of the racers and they've decided to split the money, so they each have money. But then they're confronted with this like, you know, crowd of people and these hungry kids, and it does that thing where it's like, oh, we're going to force you to be good because you're in public right now. But like, if this wasn't a public event, all of you would absolutely be like, no, fuck that, we're keeping the money. But because you are on the spot, you are coerced into doing the right thing. And I just thought it was a very kind of weak Deus Ex Machina kind of like, oh, we'll just force them to be good, rather than any sort of, I don't know, character arc or development that led them to wanting to make the more selfless decision. But then they do turn it around and they're like, but these other rich guys, they got even more money for you. So, but I don't know. What were your thoughts on the ending? Because I really kind of hated it. I was like, oh, no one grew, no one learned.
You expected more.
Yeah, I hated the ending also. The only part I liked of the ending was when they all crowd surfed, but that was just because I'm like, oh my god, crowd surfing, yay. Like, everything's fine now. We crowd surfed, we're chilling. Like, but it did make me think I did think that just feels really true, you know, like people oftentimes only do the good and the right thing when someone else is watching, right? So now that they're essentially like put on blast, like they went through all of this humiliation, all of this nonsense, all of the stuff that nobody else got to see to try and get this money. Now they're at the point where like everyone has eyes on them, or like a large group of people has eyes on them, and they're just like, oh, now I have to act accordingly. Like now I have to act in proper society, or like whatever the fuck that means, and give this money to these little starving children in front of us. And then and then the thing that I think that like works is that they're like, okay, since we too, like people who actually don't really have the means, have to give away the little that we have, these richer people who are right behind us, now you two are also going to be put on blast, and you have to give away the money that you actually do have, where like it's not going to hurt you to give this money away. And I think about how like even in today's society, in like whatever vein, when people are like this idea of cancel culture, because I don't think it really works / exists. Like people will always be fine, especially if they're rich, they're going to be okay. But like in this idea of cancel culture, the whole reason why anyone even apologizes or like comes forward about anything that they've done is because now half the time millions of people are like talking about the thing that you did. Had it just stayed in the shadows, you wouldn't have done anything, you know?
Yes.
Totally. It was almost, I like the end because I wouldn't expect anything less. The whole film was based on like, and then this happens. You're like, okay. But I think there was also, what we're getting at is it was so truthful about the performative element of charity work. And just the way it's like, but the children, and then the way those children were like brought on stage to be like, but don't you love the children and the people screaming and it's a rock concert. It parodied, I think, in a really good way, all of that world where you're like, I don't know where that money's going. And we do know now that like that's not, most of that money is not going to the earth in this case, or the children. Like a lot of that money is making probably a nonprofit CEO a lot of money.
Yeah.
So I like the performative nature of that moment, and that none of them, that actually in the acting, the thing that they like traded the money in for the cheers and for the joy, and it made me feel like there was an understanding. It was almost like a very good transition into where we're at now, like an understanding of, I'm trading this money in for like cultural capital. They didn't have that quite set up in 2001, but like if this was now, you'd be like, okay, great. Now like everybody here's, they'd like have their follow me here. I just gave away all this money. And just like the way that they were like amped from like the cheering, but you're like, that's not gonna feed you those cheers. Except today it might, because they could pivot in, people go on these reality shows, maybe on Survivor, not thinking, okay, I'm gonna win the money because the money's going to be gone really fast anyways, but how can I parlay that into like an influencer career? And then I can like sell Tide strips on Instagram and maybe I could survive a day longer.
Yeah, just saw Ronald from Jury Duty in a national commercial.
It was also the interesting part of just like Smash Mouth 1 just being like, okay, Smash Mouth, now I'm buckled in. And then being like, oh, you guys are giving the money away. That's what you're doing, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And how like I think a lot about like the pressure that like people have to be put under sometimes for whatever reason to like do like the thing that helps a collective. And it's so interesting like who is able to like administer that pressure, because like arguably Smash Mouth is already doing the right thing because they're doing this benefit concert, so they already are like on board anti-capitalist, like as anti-capitalist as this movie would allow someone to be,
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, okay, so we're bringing others into it now, right is the feeling of it, which I think is just kind of like how you have to like deal with people in some ways, where it's just like, no, you were gonna do the right thing, right? There's no question about it, right?
That's such a good point, what both of you are saying. And Riv, I liked how you said like the performative nature of charity work, because I'm realizing that like, as far as we are conditioned to believe, there are like basically two kinds of people that do charity work, mutual aid, donate money, blah, blah, blah. It's people that are doing it for the optics. And in this case, in Rat Race's case, getting guilted into doing it for the optics. And then the other group of people who do it are the pie in the sky, tree loving hippies, the people who just like don't realize how real the world is and are just like, oh, they just got like a bleeding heart or whatever. And there's no space left in the middle to say, well, maybe we do this because it's human nature to take care of one another. Maybe we do this because, like you said, Thalia, it benefits the collective of some way. Like the narrative of why someone would donate their time, their money, whatever, is either because like you're doing it to look good or because, you're crazy and too nice or whatever,
And now this was very much this time period, because I'm thinking we had a very similar conversation about Clueless, which I know was earlier in the 90s, but that had like a very strong charity, share being like, this is how I'm going to do good and give away all the good things at the end of like that movie too ended like in charity was the answer to capitalism. And I think during this period of time, like charity was the answer. That's how you deal with it. Systems of charity. And then that affects the nonprofit world. And we still have this trickle down. Like we cannot move away from the hierarchy of capitalism. And I think mutual aid is the absolute answer to that. Mutual aid opposes the charity system and the fact that it's non-hierarchical. But it's interesting that all these movies kind of end with, and now we're dumb, but we're good because we're doing charity.
Yeah. Really easy way to just redeem everyone in 1 minute.
To the general poor. Like it's always like the feed the children poor, or that like also just feed the earth is kind of a glorious like vague premise.
Especially after they've like Not for Nothing kind of did all these things just that hurt the earth. Like throughout the film. Like
just trashed it.
Caused so much damage.
Like I think about like Catherine Bates and like all those cars. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All those cars that she like has dumped in the desert because people don't want to buy squirrels. That's not helping the earth.
I mean, how many cars were stolen in this movie? They're just like stealing cars left and right.
Wow.
Cuba Gooding Jr. steals that bus driver's clothes. Like, they're exacting so much harm.
Oh, that was a great scene. I did love that scene. The gender dynamics of that scene were very hilarious to me because it said a truth about just the discomfort of female genitalia, and that's how he gets the man to give him his clothes. He's like, I'm going to describe birth, and his final last move was like, I'm going to say vagina. And I just thought that there was something about that was so important historically. It's like, this makes sense, this needs to be preserved.
Yeah, there was an honest critique in there. Like, this man would rather give away his clothes than to discuss female anatomy.
Yeah. And the way Cuba Gooding Jr. says vagina, it was...
He was... Oh!
Yeah. He's an Academy Award-winning actor.
Mm-hmm.
That was
and he
a
proved
moment.
It. Oh, we didn't talk about the heart moment, though, with the, that was weird.
Yeah. That happened as well in this movie, for sure.
That was really...
That was bizarre.
Bizarre, but also another one where it hit me, and I was like, oh, this is so... part of my memory and makeup, and this is very funny. This is hilarious.
He goes, do you want to touch it? I'm like, what do you mean, do you want to touch this like heart that's meant for a transplant? No, I don't want to fucking touch it. But then he goes and he does it, and they hold it and they play with it and lose it.
Absolute lunacy. Like, this is Wayne Knight's job to transport organs from one place to the next, and I just was so thrown off. It was just such a, like, it was one of those bits that they were like, just like, put it in there, they take out the heart falls out in the desert, the dog, they play fetch with the heart. But like, this... I
thought it was such pure clown. Like, to me, it was just so silly.
I just couldn't get on board with, like, this man is gonna be like, let's look at this heart. Like, this is his job. Like, he's done this before, and this is today he's like, you know what we should do? We should risk my entire livelihood and also the life of a human being to just, like, take a look at this heart in this box.
That's why I thought it was such a fun, like, kink. Like, it was so weird that he's like, I need to.
Yeah.
I don't know. I related to that of, like, just sometimes you're like, I would not be able to sit with a human heart. And I don't know. I'd be like, I have to look at it. It's right there.
I thought it was so interesting.
I didn't realize it was a kink. Then if it's a kink, then it's a kink. Then, then that's okay. We're comfortable with that. And we're not going to shame Wayne Knight.
He, like, played it very much like he could, like, it was like he couldn't help it. Like, it was like bubbling in him from the moment he, like, picked up the Mr. Bean. Like, he's like, oh, at some point I'm gonna show him my heart. But then I also thought it was interesting that it was like Mr. Bean's character who had it, and this is maybe a deeper analysis than like the movie warrants, but like thinking about like him as this character who feels so pure of heart, and now he's sitting here with an actual heart, and this heart is getting tossed around and like bitten up and like gets a nickel stuck in it and like all this stuff. And then and then this guy is like, we're gonna have to like kill a drifter to get his heart.
Oh yeah.
To like give it to the thing. And Mr. Bean's character is like, I think you're doing too much. And he's just like, am I? Like, it's like, yeah, you did too much the minute you asked to look at the heart. Like, what are you talking about? Am I? Like,
yeah.
And that was telling the way he talked about the drifter, really, because it was laid out there that there's always, I mean, that's the class system. There's always someone lower. He's like, well, who doesn't have any family? Who's in nothing? And he uses that language, and it was like very clear that you're like at the bottom. In America, we have this myth that there's no class system. Like, that's for India. India has a class system. Here, we are caste free. And it was just so well defined of like, here there's people that we're going to consider absolute nothings. And that's because they have no tie to anyone. And then he's like, do you have ties to anyone? But it's nice that then we're like, Mr. Bean, who we all have fallen in love with, is that nothing. So it's actually kind of beautiful reversal. Wait a minute. Is this movie brilliant?
I mean, there was another joke from that scene that really hit for me when when Mr. Bean is like, it's like, don't worry, my friend. You will find a heart. I have lost my heart many times before. And he's like, I made a joke to help you forget how screwed you are. I was like, that's good. That's very good.
Yeah, that was my favorite from him. Yeah.
It's filled. Go see this movie immediately.
Oh my God. I went from warning everyone away from it to like a sterling recommendation.
I do want to see one of those videos of, where they show young people music or things that like you would not have seen. I do want to see like a panel of like maybe not even Gen Z, but like younger Gen Alpha when the time is right. when they're ready to see such crude, but I just want to see a reactive, like how do you react to this with no context other than this current context? Is it just like, what is it?
Yeah. Although this movie does it plays in like the, the Hanna-Barbera like slapstick farcical cartoon world. So I feel like a child, like a 5-year-old would be like, yay, 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 yay. Like, oh my God, so many people getting hit. Oh my God, a cow's attached to a hot air balloon. Like, wow, wow. Would love to hear a college student from right now watch this movie.
Yeah. That's what I meant. Yeah, not a 5-year. 5-year-olds for sure would love it.
Yeah.
For sure. It's a winner. All right. Should we give some awards?
Yeah, let's get to awards. I cannot believe we talked already for an hour and a half about this movie. I was like, this is going to be a short episode for us. We're not going to have much to say.
No, there's a lot of fodder. It just was like hidden.
All right, Talia. So we have 3 awards that we give out. The first award is Best Politics. Goes to the character with the best politics in the movie. Which I don't know.
You know what? I think it's a toss-up between Mr. Bean and Kathy Bates.
Kathy Bates, the murderer?
Yeah. Because, you know what? Buy my wares. I'm sitting here in the middle of nowhere. Save the squirrels. She's actually doing something for the earth, in a sense.
And she's getting those cars off the road. The gas is probably more destructive than the actual car.
You know?
Oh, wow.
So, like, that's the take that I want to take.
It is a take. That is a take for sure.
But Mr. Bean also.
And Mr. Bean, yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Bean.
I'm gonna wait. No, I feel like there's a clear one for me, and we haven't mentioned her yet. But she's kind of pivotal to the plot, is the sex worker who comes back around, and having been humiliated by the billionaires, she seduces the one billionaire, and then goes and gets all the money and takes it for herself, and then they run away with it, or she tries to.
Yeah.
Ooh.
That's a good one. And she's just trying to screw over the disgusting billionaires who used her as a pawn in their game.
Yeah,
she's not.
And she's like, I'm not gonna I'm just gonna like do my. Yeah, she's like, I'm gonna take this. Put her as a nominee. I think her and the child, the little girl, because at least she tells her dad, like, what's up? This is a living. She says this is a living hell, and I think she's the only one who really names the reality of the world. It's so clearly.
It could be a 3-way tie between Mr. Bean.
I think we have four contenders.
Oh, that's right, and Kathy Bates, 4.
We could take Kathy Bates off. Honorable mention.
Honorable mention.
But yeah, the characters are so one-dimensional that no one really stands out as like, that person had the best politics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Now that we've talked through this movie for this long, I'm debatable how one-dimensional. I feel like we found many dimensions.
Sure. That I feel like we had to do a lot of work to kind of unearth and uncover.
All right, so our next award goes to the character with the worst politics in the movie. This is the Worst Politics Award.
The billionaire who sets it up, the Sinclair guy, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Gotta be Sinclair.
Easily.
Donald Sinclair, which must have been also like a Donald Trump nod, right?
Yeah.
Oh, very well. I did like that they gave him ridiculous veneers as a costume makeup choice. Yeah, he has that line right in the beginning when he tells them about the race, and they're like, you can't just like pit 6 people against each other in a race across the country. And he says, I can do anything I like. I'm eccentric. And I feel like if that's your worldview, you have the worst politics.
Yeah, fully.
Totally.
All right. And then our last award is Best Supporting Character / Spinoff. So this goes to your favorite supporting character and maybe a spinoff you would want to see them in.
I think Miss Smart.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I am a big Amy Smart
her
fan.
Performance. Me too. Like,
Yeah.
I would have folded. Same. Like, yeah, she, like, yeah, what do you want? Like, I'll do it. Like, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Also, just
Totally.
her piloting skills of the helicopter alone.
Yes.
Like, she was that. Yeah, like, I want to see whatever you have going on.
Yeah, she was a badass, and I loved when she knew, it was like a fun, like, she knows how to fix the car and do all these things, and the trope of like, I'm gonna take revenge hardcore is always very fun. It's very Alanis Morissette. I liked it.
I would, now that we've discussed them a bit, watch the Blaine and Wayne brother prequel movie to this. Like, what What was their upbringing? What happened to their mother? How long have they been on their own? How did they become con men? When did he choose to do this piercing? Like let's uncover all of that. I feel like there's a rich history to go in with these two.
I mean, it was such an ensemble piece, to be honest. I would watch a Rat Race too.
Wow. So what happens? Like the six are reconvened?
I think it's just they go back to their lives. I think like it's just they go back to their lives, and even though they're not still in the rat race, like things still happen that are so crazy, but they're not pursuing anything. It's just like, oh, because the whole idea was like all these insane things happen to them because they're pursuing this journey, but like they go back to their lives and they're still like getting smacked by cows and like running into Lucy buses, and like we're just seeing them in their normal lives, but like still these like insane things happen. It's just very quotidian. And maybe they're just also realizing like, shit, I really could have actually used that. I should have taken the money, because that's the movie in which we get a sense of the reality of their material circumstances.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah, like the real rat race. That makes me think of I think it's like the second episode of Squid Game, which is, if I'm remembering correctly, I think it's titled Hell, and have we all seen Squid Game? Spoilers for Squid Game. It's after they do the first game and they all choose to leave and not die, and then they go back to their regular lives, and that episode is titled Hell, and it shows like, oh, that's right, our lives are so desperate that we're actually going to go choose to go back to the murder game.
Right.
So, kind of hits that
yeah,
same.
That's a great episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, this was such a.
This is a lot of fun.
This is so much fun,
Yeah.
and I really hope people get excited about talking about Rat Race and stick through this combo, because it's a great.
I hope that
ride.
like someone at Amazon is really confused after the episode drops that like so many people have rented this movie again. I hope they're like, what is going on? Like, what the fuck?
So before we wrap, the last thing we like to do with our guests is discuss how we strive to practice our values in our day-to-day lives, whether they be anti-capitalist or leftist, whatever. So is there one thing that you do in your life, whether it's like a practice you engage in or like an organization that you work with, that you would like to share with us?
I think, okay, so I'm like an independent producer also. So I produce a lot of like shows, like theater shows and like short films. And part of my kind of, I guess, thought process and like ideology when like going into producing anything is how we are making the room as equitable as possible, even if we are not able to provide like the most in the range of like funds that we can provide. How are we making sure that this room is like inviting and welcoming to people? So constantly making sure that we're providing like food, constantly making sure that there's a means of transportation for whoever needs it, asking people, just like plain old asking people what they need and what they want at that moment. I like see it as like a really big like thing, and just like how do we practice community, because I think it's a thing that can be lost. And I think that a lot of times when we have people when we're living in a city like this that it has so much movement, like people coming in and out all the time, people don't always know what it means to form community, and also don't realize that it is an active like practice. Like community is a thing that you do, and that just allowing me to kind of be more involved with like who my neighbors are, and like literally like the people who own the shops on my street, like knowing them and talking to them, and like seeing the little thing that I could do for you as a person, whether it's just like helping you move something or like providing you like a snack because you need it, like that kind of thing. So yeah.
That's beautiful.
I love that.
And Thalia, I know that you are currently producing a piece called Run Against the Wind, Black Women for a Liberated Palestine. And I wanted to ask if you would share with our audience a little bit about that project, because I think it's really important and a lot of people would love to know about it.
Thank you. So Run Against the Wind is a collection of curated text by Black women scholars such as June Jordan, Aja Monet, Ntozake Shange, who have taken a lot of time just during the Black radical movement to talk about Palestine and like our different ties with the Palestinian people. My friend and co-collaborator Tashi Sr. came to me with this project because we both see and have seen the ways that like Palestinians have also supported the Black Lives Matter movement in 2020, and they gave all those Palestinian people gave so many tips on how to deal with like the police brutality that we were going through and like all of these things. So we gathered all of this text from these scholars and put them in conversation with one another, and are presenting them at Jack and Y on May 31st. And all of the money that we raised from that event is going to donating eSIMs to the Palestinian people so that all of us can continue to be in contact and to continue to bear witness to what is going on, because I think that we are in an age where, with all of the access we do have to social media and to each other, that access is often taken away when it comes time to like speak out against large atrocities. So allowing and giving people the means to speak on what is going on with them and making sure that we are constantly keeping our eyes open and paying attention is the least that we can do. And it's been really, really great being able to gather this text together and to have a means of presenting. Jack New York has provided us with space and has been just an amazing co-producer in this process too.
Yeah, that's an amazing project. And Jack
That's
New York is an
awesome.
amazing space. They've been lending their space for a lot of radical action during this time. Went to a teach in there, and just an incredible art space that's really doing what needs to be done right now. And this project sounds amazing. If people can't make it, is there a place to donate towards the project and towards what you're raising funds for?
Yeah, so we, on our Eventbrite, I have linked several different places, like GoFundMe's and other like platforms for people to donate to. We've noticed that a lot of the GoFundMe's have been taken down. We don't know if it's by like the people who started the fundraisers themselves are from the GoFundMe like team or whatnot, but like we have found Operation Olive Branch that has a list of just a plethora of different places to organize and donate and different ways that you yourself can get involved. We plan on having a direct action for our audience when they come in of just donating to all of the students who are in the encampments right now, because they are doing a lot of work to try and get these universities to divest from Israel. And how do we support these people who are like, you know, just a train ride away from us in a lot of different cases? And some of those things are like just bringing them like food, bringing them water, bringing them blankets, because they're staying out there day in and night, just trying to get their university to do something that is for the greater good.
We'll make sure to link to all of those in the episode description. And thank you for all of the work that you're doing on this. That's huge.
Thank you.
Thalia, it was so nice meeting you. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for choosing this batshit movie. I'm so glad we got to revisit it. Turns out it's a secret anti-capitalist banger.
Yeah. Who would have thought?
Who would have thought?
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank y'all for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you all so much for listening. Make sure to follow us on Instagram and TikTok. And if you want to support the show and get access to our Patreon episodes, the link is in the episode description in your podcast player or at mvcpod.com.
For next week, we will be watching Michael Moore's 2009 documentary, Capitalism, A Love Story.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.